I am Nancy Maron. I'm the program manager for this strand of research at Ithaka S+R that focuses on the sustainability of digital resources. Ithaka S+R is a strategy and research group, which means that we do consulting and we also do original research. The folks that we work with most are libraries, publishers, scholarly societies, academics, anyone in the realm of scholarly communications. They've seen their world change due to digital technology, and we try to help them figure it out, and we try to research the questions that we think will help them to figure it out. Over the past decade or more, libraries, university libraries and college libraries, any kind of research libraries, have invested a tremendous amount of their own resources and through grants in developing a wealth of digital content based on their collections and their special collections and content that they feel is going to be most useful for the community that they serve. Once the content is created, though, it's not the end of the story. It's fantastic to have it in digital form, but then it needs to be cared for. It may need to be enhanced. The functionalities that they've created may need to be improved upon. And they're certainly going to want to increase the content and to continue to develop it as their own collections continue to grow. So that whole suite of questions about how to continue to make the content most valuable for their users will only continue to be more important to them as time goes on. Sustainability, specifically for digital resources, has become a major issue. In the last decade or so, there's been so much creation of digital content in particular, which has been fantastic to see. But it becomes hard and fairly complicated to maintain it. And by maintain, we don't just mean preserve, but we mean keep it valuable and interesting and dynamic and to keep people engaged in it. And so that whole suite of activities is much more complicated, and the fun only starts once the content has been created. Jisc and Ithaka S+R started to talk about a challenge that we noticed in the system. And we noticed a problem that was that a lot of grant-funded projects, the leaders of those projects, would create something wonderful and then return to the funder. And it was not just Jisc, it was many funders were experiencing this, seeking additional funding to support the ongoing operations of the projects that they'd begun. In principle, this sounds like it might be a good idea, but often funders are looking to invest in new things, not support core operating costs. So the challenge was, how can these grantees, how can their projects continue to live on in a more self-sustaining way past that original grant? So we did an exploration of what those different revenue-generating models were, and we created a very useful report that goes through what those are and who they're useful for and what some challenges may be. But the really interesting part of that paper is that as we did this research and we spoke to more and more people, we found that one of the biggest differences between the models that were being used in the commercial world and what we were seeing on the scholarly side in particular were mindsets. It wasn't this model or that model. It was a sense of understanding that there's a very, very competitive market out there, even for nonprofit digital content. It's a market for audience. How can we go out there, find our audience, understand what's competing for attention with this audience, and then create things that they are going to love to use and be excited to use. So there's a piece of that paper that ends up talking about what these fundamental mindsets are that are going to be useful for people who find themselves managing ongoing digital resources. As we sat around with folks workshopping this paper and thinking about it afterwards, there were so many exceptions. People felt that they were interesting models in theory, but to really understand if they could work or if they were working, we really needed to look at how they were actually being applied in practice. So we decided on a methodology that would involve case studies, going to identify projects that were experimenting with this and finding out in detail why they'd chosen to try it, how they were doing with it, and what steps they'd taken to get there. The very first thing we went looking for were exciting and interesting and effective revenue models. And that was actually what drove the original selection. We also wanted diversity of locations. We have some that are in the US, some in the UK, one in France, one in Germany, and one in Egypt. And we also wanted different kinds of projects. So you see some that are born digital, some that are digitization projects. We wanted a diversity of institutional homes. So some are in research libraries, and some are in cultural heritage organizations, and some are in other sorts of places. So we have a nice wide range of types of projects that allowed us to really look quite deeply at how a very similar question, how do we support our digital resources, was being played out.